Calling this meeting back to order. We have some new microphones tonight that we're all getting used to, so sorry if I'm a little loud. Welcome to the meeting of February 13th, 2017. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight we have several special guests with us tonight. We have the Monsignor from St. Paul's, and I'd like to invite him up to give a benediction for Ray Wadsworth, who we're going to be honoring in just a moment.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight, Ray, and for the invitation. Certainly within our Christian scripture, we read by Jesus himself saying that he came to serve and not to be served. And certainly also elsewhere in scripture, he shared with his friends and inspiration of those who would find joy in life through his teaching, that really to be called to leadership is really one of being of service. And certainly as we gather tonight in prayer, as we recognize certainly the accomplishments and the great dedication that Ray has had to our community of Princeton here, we recognize as he has really done that in a spirit of great service and love for this community. And certainly as we honor him and give thanks for his wonderful commitment to our community, the great privilege I know that Ray has is not so much in the accomplishments that he has done, but certainly and hopefully that through his example of service, he has continued to inspire others to be of service and to really give thanks to God for the gift of our community and really to share our gifts to make this community the best that it could possibly be. And so in that spirit, we gather tonight and ask our God's blessing on us, that we may always be people of service, seeking to better and to lift up one another, to make all feel welcome, to tear down any barriers that separate us, and to never be afraid to recognize the great honor that does come through service and not through being served. Give us the courage to love one another, God. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that Council has been doing, a new tradition, is we honor individuals and organizations in the community who have gone above and beyond to make Princeton the special place that it is. And I can't think of anybody who more exemplifies this notion of service to the community than Ray Wadsworth. And we're very happy to be honoring you tonight. I remember when I first became mayor, Ray came to me and said, "I'm here for the community. Anything you ever need, I'm here for you." And he certainly has lived up to that. And I want to thank him personally and also thank him on behalf of the community. So once upon a time, Ray was a borough council person, so I think he has a understanding of some of the challenges that we face up here. And he's also volunteer firefighter. One of the main drivers behind the Spirit of Princeton, which is a group that does so much for the community. And whenever there's something we have a challenge with, people know we had the World Trade Center beam, and we wanted to find an appropriate place for it. And Ray was the one who stepped up and figured out the perfect solution, working with St. Paul's to have a appropriate spot for a very important memorial for this community, and we thank him for his leadership in helping us to find an appropriate place for the beam. And Ray is also just someone who he just has a warmth about him, and we know it's all about the community, and we want to thank you for all that you've done. So.
I want to thank council, the mayor. Really, I couldn't do all this by myself if it wasn't for people like you, that when I come to you and ask, I need help with police officers to do traffic. It's just a community affair. Everyone works together. The public works, I can't thank enough. The police department, the recreation department, the university, which steps with the fireworks. And I'll tell you, it's everyone working together. Like when we put the bricks up on Nassau Street at the Palmer Square. It went in, we had to fight, but we made it with Palmer Square management. The council worked with us, and we got the bricks in, and it brought us in over $100 and some thousand to keep the spirit of Princeton going. So everyone working together in this town, I'll tell you, I don't know any other town that the people work together so closely like right here, mayor and council, administrator. And the ladies in the administrator's office, I'll tell you, I come down here and I get them, and they'll go out and get my permits for me from the state for the Memorial Day Parade and for the fireworks or whatever. And it's really a great feeling. And I can't say enough. And the one person that backs me, stays with me for the last 59 years is my wife, Jackie. And with Monsignor, he's right there. I go to him and ask questions, and he comes out. We do things together. And just like you talked about the steel beam, he was right there with me and said yes. And how much could you ask for? So thank you so much. I love all you, and God bless you.
Thank you. All right. And we have a proclamation tonight for Black History Month. I'll read part of it, and you can read the full proclamation in the packet. Whereas much honor, strength, and stature can be attributed to the diversity of cultures and traditions that are celebrated by the residents of this great community, and whereas African Americans have played significant roles in the history of our economic, cultural, spiritual, and political development, working tirelessly to maintain and promote their culture and history, and whereas the Paul Robeson House is the property of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church. The vision for the house is to be a proud beacon in the Witherspoon-Jackson community, a living symbol of the history of the community, a cultural and contributing place in the Princeton community, and a welcoming and information center for visitors. And whereas on April 11, 2016, the designation of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood as Princeton's 20th Historic District came after an outpouring of support from neighborhood residents who shared their stories about the personal impact of Princeton's history of segregation and the perseverance of the African American community. And whereas on October 24, 2016, the Princeton Council reestablished the Civil Rights Commission to continue to advance social justice and equity in our community. And whereas Black History Month is a special time for all Americans to recall the heritage of those Black citizens who helped to build the Princeton community, the state of New Jersey, and our country, and look to the future to continue to improve society so that we live up to the ideals of freedom, equality, and justice that are embodied in our Constitution. Now therefore, I, Liz Lempert, Mayor of Princeton, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2017 to be Black History Month, in the Princeton community and encourage all residents to join us in honoring the many contributions made by African Americans throughout this region and to participate in the many educational events honoring the contributions of Black Americans. And now we have announcements, and I don't see Tanisha here yet, so we'll start with, what's that? Yeah, we'll start with Anita to come on up for the Palmer Square events calendar.
It's that time of year again. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Anita Freslone, Marketing Director at Palmer Square. Congratulations. I got all teary-eyed. I don't know what's going on tonight. I think you all have our event calendar up there. It's jam-packed as usual. We did squeeze in an event earlier this month that isn't on the list, Palmer Square on Ice. We did an ice sculpting event, brought about 1,000 people to the square, gorgeous day, and I think we're going to do it again next year, so that was very good. I'm happy to be working with Kathy and her staff, and we work well with the police department and the health officials, and hopefully I'm the easy part of your night. I think I've said that joke for like 10 years, by the way. It just comes out of my mouth. I can't help it. Does anyone have any questions or?
No?
Okay, I
Great.
appreciate it. Thank you very
Congratulations
much.
on the ice sculpture event.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's cool.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll start with Ms. Howard. Any announcements? No. Mr. Miller, any announcements? Ms. Crumler? Ms. Butler?
I was just going to announce that the rec department has started their seasonal hiring. They started on February 1st for summer and seasonal maintenance and whatnot, so those applications are up online. And on February 20th, they will begin registration for programming for summer camps, etc.
Great. Mr. Quinn? Okay, I have a few announcements. The first is that Sustainable Princeton put together an A to Z guide on what to do with every single kind of item that you want to dispose of and what you can recycle, what you can compost. And that there was an ad in the last Town Topics, and also everybody should be receiving that in the mail. So keep your eye out for it. They spent a lot of time putting it together, and it's a really great resource. Also, Princeton is always winning these random awards. We were ranked number 83 in the top 150 cities for millennials report. So we often talk about wanting to be a town that attracts younger people. It could be that millennials are getting older as time goes by. But it's great that we were on this list. So it was based on a ranking using unemployment rate, percentage of residents within the age of 25 to 34, cost of living, future job growth, transportation costs, and crime and safety. And then finally, I have a report about our sister city of Petronello. So there are going to be 2 groups coming over that would like to meet with us, council. So before the meeting, and I'll email this out to everybody, but before the meeting of March 13th, and also there's a second group coming before the meeting of April 24th. And we'll have a just quick meet and greet with them at 5:30 before our 6 o'clock closed session on both of those dates for whoever is free to come. And are there any staff reports or staff announcements? No? Okay. Then we will move on to comments from the public, and we'll start with those people who signed up on the sheet, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who would like to speak for items not already on the agenda, and we'll start with Kate Warren.
Good evening, everybody, and it's nice to see you all. I haven't been here for a while. And welcome, Tim. I'm here this evening to address an immediate public safety issue, namely the stagnation of S1632 83700 that sits stalled in committee. As you may recall from my previous statements regarding this legislation prohibits certain light frame residential construction in densely populated census tracts and establishes construction requirements for certain light frame residential construction in other census tracts. I have attached the proposed bills to my comments. Others here tonight who are much more educated on exactly what's intended by this legislation plan to speak. Given the most recent conflagration in Maplewood, I'm here to follow up on an email I sent to all of you last week to publicly request that you call for immediate action that will result in passage of this important legislation. I urge you to vigorously voice your continued support for the proposed legislation introduced in the Senate February 16, 2016, that you articulated in Resolution 16-105, passed on March 28, 2016, wherein you call for, quote, swift consideration and passage, unquote. Recognizing Councilman Quinn was not yet elected to office, as well as the absence of Councilman Miller and Liverman, I urge all three of you to add your support behind the resolution at this time. The resolution addresses a public safety issue, not only for tenants and homeowners and their personal property, but for first responders who bravely give so freely of themselves to protect others. These bills sit stalled in both the Senate Committee on Urban Affairs Committee, chaired by Democrat Senator Jeff Van Drew, as well as the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee, chaired by Democrat Assemblyman and Speaker Pro Temp Jerry Green. Ironically, the Assemblywoman and Deputy Speaker Jazzy represents Maplewood and sits as Vice Chair of the Assembly Committee. Hopefully, having this issue hit so close to her constituents is ample motivation for her to move the legislation quickly. This legislation was introduced in response to an Edgewater fire in 2014 that displaced 500 individuals. Since that time, there have been at least 2 additional devastating fires in New Jersey where lightwood construction has been utilized. The time for action is now. It's time to put aside the building industry's special interest and do what's right to protect life and property. My request to you this evening is that you call the committee chairs to demand action, as well as the sponsors and co-sponsors, to ask that they demand swift consideration on the proposed legislation. I've added the names and telephone numbers here of all those people. Thank you for your attention to my request this evening. I look forward to learning what action you will be taking and when such action will occur.
Thank you. I was going to wait for this for reports, but I'll just jump in right now and give part of my report. I was down in Trenton earlier last week for a mayor's legislative day and had the opportunity to pose the question about the stalled legislation to Senate President Sweeney and also Vincent Prieto, who's the Speaker of the Assembly. And the Assembly Speaker, Vincent Prieto, said he was planning to move forward with it soon, he said. And the Senate President didn't answer the question. So I can report on that. And I'd like to hear, I think there's a few other people who signed up to speak on this, and then we can talk as a council about a response. So Lexi Asmus.
Alexi Asmus, 32 Maple Street. Just in response to the what Speaker Prieto said, we've talked to him several times. He said right after the first Edgewater fire that he was going to do something, and he's been saying that repeatedly, and nothing has happened, and it's over 2 years. And you should know he is a code official, and his district is the Edgewater district. So he may well be conflicted on this, and we are very concerned about that. I have been working with other citizens across New Jersey, with fire safety experts, with national code experts. I've actually been to some of the national code meetings, and there are supporting S1632 A3770 that Kate mentions. And I brought some information for council for you, which I've given to you. One is a partial list of these massive fires. This isn't just a New Jersey problem. It's happening across North America and in Europe as well. They happen regularly, probably monthly across the country. Construction fires are an issue as well as fires in occupied buildings because the construction fire spreads. Luckily, in Maplewood a week ago, there was a non-combustible New Jersey Transit station next door, and the fire didn't do extensive damage. But in Phoenix this summer, there was a huge fire which severely damaged surrounding homes. Residents are just beginning to move back in. There was another terrible fire in 2008 in Conshohocken, PA, where a construction fire from phase 2 of a project moved into phase 1 that was already occupied, and over 150 occupied units was lost. So when you have a fire that's a conflagration, it's the size of a city block, it spreads, and we were very lucky in Maplewood that it didn't. So the code reform has to stop construction fires of this magnitude as well. You know, if you can't have block-sized fires because they spread. And I just wanted, so I gave you that list. I hope you can look through it. It's notes, it's partial. I stayed up late last night to try to put all the fires on it. Fire experts and code specialists sent it to me. I guess I'm out of my time, but I'd like to say I also have another option in there. Developer Jonathan Arnold in Kansas City is building non-combustible developments, large-scale developments, mega block developments. It is supported by HUD. It's supported by Affordable Housing Partners. There's a lot of affordable housing in that development. So it's not really an affordable issue. And I also included a synopsis of the bill, and on the back side of that are some external costs of these fires that you may not have thought about. But like Kate, I urge you to urge our state legislature to move on these bills. Thank you.
Thank you. And Kip Cherry.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. Those are propane tankers at Avalon Bay. You can see the little conduits that go up into the units that are under construction to feed propane heaters. We are at a watershed moment at this point. The horrendous fire in Maplewood is telling us that the safety of these large stick construction apartment complexes cannot be assured. Besides questions of fire safety, once the complexes are finished, largely a state building code issue, now we know in the clearest way that complexes under construction, as our Avalon Bay still is, are very vulnerable to fire. And we know that during construction, much of the oversight is a local issue. Yes, the Edgewater complex fire started because of a known worker mistake, and we still have not implemented new rules to prevent such a mistake. But the critical factor now is that once the fire started, it quickly became a conflagration. With Maplewood, we don't know yet why that fire started. We do know that propane heaters had been left on overnight to dry newly applied drywall. And those are the photographs that show the same kind of propane tanks at our Avalon Bay. Could any of these heaters have been the cause? Let's say that a heater malfunctions, maybe a rubber hose carrying the propane starts to leak. There are any number of reasons why there could have been a flame. But in the end, what happens again is a conflagration, and that's what happened in Maplewood, a terrible fire that caused horrible damage and also endangered the lives of all of the fire safety people that had to fight it. So at this point, we've been talking about this for several years, and I think it's really important now to start to take some action on this. Talked to Bob Gregory, and he has already informed us that Avalon Bay has put sprinklers in the entire facility at this point, even though in the past, most places that were under construction didn't have fire sprinklers, but they have gotten theirs in. There were none in Maplewood, there were none in Edgewater in the constructed areas. That's why the fire moved so fast. But there are other things that need to be done. For instance, there should be temporary smoke and heat detectors. There should be inspections of the hoses that you see in that picture. There should be additional fire safety personnel where there are heaters. This is a requirement, and in Maplewood there were no inspectors right at the point of those heaters being used. And we also need, I would recommend, frankly, more than the discussion, and I think the discussion's great, but actually a formal resolution by council asking the legislature to move forward with S1632, A3770, and get it out of committees. It's been stuck there for some time. That would take care of the building code problem, whereas the local issue is something that either Bob Gregory can continue to implement further, or it may need an ordinance. And when we talked about it 2 years ago, he felt that some things required an ordinance. So I think it's really important for us to move on that right away. There's an article on the Maplewood fire right in Town Topics, so clearly the folks at Town Topics thought it was very relevant to what's happening here in Princeton. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Mr. Driscoll?
Paul Driscoll, 141 Harris Road. Sorry. We seem to be witnessing a discomforting number of massive fires here in New Jersey. An account of the recent massive construction fire in Maplewood, New Jersey, as reported in Town Topics, quotes an Avalon Bay spokesman as saying that safety, or quote, safety is our topmost priority at Avalon Bay, which is why we continue to incorporate safeguards beyond what is required, end quote. Then he provides examples of steps taken by Avalon Bay, such as incorporating upgraded NFPA 13 sprinkler systems and masonry firewalls which go beyond what is required by New Jersey fire and safety codes. However, statements such as this sound much more like a standard press release, even an advertisement, and unfortunately does nothing to reassure anxious residents who are living in or near Avalon Bay projects, including the multifamily development under construction, which we have here in Princeton. We should not overlook the fact that the construction fire in Maplewood encompassed an area the size of a city block, and it took more than 120 firemen to put it out. This would be an unsettling experience for any community, not to mention the high cost to taxpayers for fighting these huge fires. Also critical is the fact that this is the second Avalon Bay fire in 2 years, following the Avalon Edgewater fire, which took place in January 2015, destroying 240 apartments, temporarily displacing 1,000 people and leaving 500 people homeless. 15 years earlier, in 2000, there was another massive construction fire at the same site in Edgewater, which burned everything to the ground and destroyed 9 nearby homes. All 3 massive Avalon Bay fires are ample reasons for concern among Princeton residents. The health and safety of people currently living at the Avalon Princeton complex, as well as for homeowners who live nearby, are at considerable risk while the project is still under construction. The fact that all 3 Edgewater and Maplewood fires occurred at complexes which were built to state code or above code is convincing evidence that the current New Jersey fire and safety codes are inadequate and that tougher regulations are now needed. For these reasons, I fully support Kate Warren's recommendation that you call the appropriate New Jersey key legislators who sit on both the Senate Community and Urban Affairs Committee and the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee to urge swift consideration and passage of Bill S1632. Kate has provided the list of contact information. It often appears to New Jersey residents that many state legislators are quietly running away from this issue. I've been urging a lot of residents to write directly or contact legislators, and of course they've signed a lot of petitions in circulation, and that is the way they see it. As members of council, your voices should carry some extra weight. It is also, of course, extremely important for New Jersey residents to call or write to the same legislators. If there is anybody in the audience who would like to contact me at this meeting, I can email them suggested text and list of contacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Come on up to the microphone and please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Matthew Head, 15 Haven Road. I'm just doing a project on local government where after different types of meetings, like council meetings or zoning or planning meetings, I'm breaking down the video and just kind of with bullet points and emailing it out to people and just kind of making it easier to scan through the meeting. Because I watch the videos online and it's kind of hard to find, it's just hard to go through it all. It's, if anyone has any interest, handing out flyers doesn't cost anything or, thanks.
Great, thank you for that service.
Matthew. What are you asking us? I would love this service.
Oh, yeah, it's just, it's not really a question, it's just more of a statement.
So you're going to have it available? Where is it available?
Yeah, it's just available on lilgov.com. You just enter your email and click whatever meetings you're interested in.
Can you give a copy of the flyer to Kathy Brzezinski, and then we can take a look at it? Maybe it's even something we can post on our website.
Yeah, it's right across the street. I would have employed him had I known. Oh my God.
Right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment?
Wait, can you tell me the URL again?
We're getting it. It's being passed around. So we'll take a look at this and potentially post it on the municipal website.
May I just make a suggestion as well as on the municipal website? There's no way to track resolutions knowing what meeting they were passed. And so I just happened to remember it was March of last year or winter of last year and had to go through all of the meeting agendas to find it. So if there's some way to reference the resolutions with a particular date of when they were passed or what meeting.
Right, okay. I will pass that on to the website committee to think about as we reorganize the site.
The website, but also, could you not search for that if you went into the minutes? I think there might be a way to find it.
It's for a longer discussion, but
All right.
the problem is our minutes are stored on a different server than our website, so you can't search on the website to access it. I feel your pain, but we're working on trying to make the technology work for us. Okay.
Are you going to respond to the Avalon Bay?
Yeah, let's respond to the Avalon Bay, and then I want to go back and introduce Tanisha, and then we'll go back to the rest of the reports. Okay. So, can I call up you, Bob Gregory, and if you can summarize for the council, just give us a report. And I saw you out in the hallway, so I know some people got a preview. And then we can talk about what sort of action makes sense for us.
Sure. So there's a couple levels to this. First is clearly the state level, which everyone so eloquently made their point tonight, and that's where we can do the most good, is to get building codes changed so this type of construction doesn't exist. The second piece of that is we've all had some conversations about looking at trying to discern what OSHA says, the fire code, as it relates to construction site safety, and see if there's anything we need to do above and beyond that in an ordinance to give fire inspectors more, I guess, leeway to get on sites and make sure some of the things like they've talked about, inspecting of hoses, connections, things like that. Now this is done under the building permit, so the building department does do it, so this would be kind of like a redundancy, a double safety check on construction sites. Most of the fire code stuff deals with site access and ensuring that standpipes and fire department connections are working for sprinkler systems, so if there is a fire, the fire department has access. So the question is, we need to evaluate,
do we need to go further than that? So what does the building department do, and things they can't do we need to do something to be able to do those inspections, make sure things are done safely. With respect to the Avalon Bay site, first I'd just like to give kudos to our building inspectors, John Pettinotti, Dan Taglieri, and Vic Romatowski, because they've done a great job out there. They've been on top of it. They've brought me in when they needed me to look at things and make some decisions. They've been very responsive to the fire department's needs, and they've, kept Avalon Bay, they've held them to their permit requirements. So like making sure that all the sprinklers and standpipes work even in construction. The propane tanks, so the code there is the tanks have to be within 10, the minimum is 10 feet. So you have a heater inside the building, the propane has to be outside the building and at least 10 feet from the heater. So they've kept up with that. They've done a good job. They've had fire watches on. And a lot of the credit does go to building for, being on top of this, because one of the things you'll see, and speaking to, some of our community members, like Maplewood and some of those didn't have these things in place, like a fire watch and, things like that. So when this wraps up, I do want to recap with John, and see kind of what worked, what didn't work, so we can make a informed decision on what we need to do going forward as it relates to construction, site safety, fire safety in particular. And the good news is they have all the tanks and heaters lined up today, so they're going to start moving them off-site because they have the building heat completely operational, so they can finish their sheetrock work with using the building heat to heat the spaces.
Oops. I didn't mean to make
No,
noise.
that's-
Were you done? Are you still going?
Yeah, no, that's,
Okay. Thank you. And I also want to echo my thanks, and I'm sure council thanks to the building department, to the fire inspection staff. I think Princeton, I don't know if all residents understand how exceptional our staff is, and this has not been the easiest project. And I certainly appreciate your thoroughness and professionalism throughout this, and it gives me a lot of comfort to know that you guys are out there every day. Are there any questions for Bob before we discuss what we want to do? Okay. Well, my recommendation, council did pass a resolution already on this, so my recommendation would be, I don't think we want to be in the practice of re-voting on resolutions we've already voted on, but when we do have instances where legislation is stalled, I think it would be appropriate, given what just happened, to send a letter, I'm happy to draft it, where we include the resolution and send it out again, encouraging our legislators that this is a pressing issue and we need them to pass the legislation.
I think that makes sense, and it allows our newest member to join in.
Oh, sure. I did go back and read the resolution, and I made a couple calls to the bill sponsor's office and impressed upon them the importance to get going on this. So I'd love for us to send a letter and strongly urge them to move ahead.
And I think we should speak with our own representatives, especially to remind them of our urgent call to get this moving.
Yeah, I did see Assemblyman Zwicker is one of the sponsors, and Senator Bateman is one of the sponsors. Yes, well, and also some of our our other representatives are on here as well. We sometimes feel like we have 6. So, okay, well, thank you. And I also want to thank the Corps of Residents who have been our second set of eyes on this project, for all of your help and all the energy and research help. We appreciate it, and I think you help us do a better job. So thank you.
Mayor, I have a question. I also support the idea of writing the letter. I did want to ask Bob, I feel like when this project started, we sat down and we talked about whether we could have rules that were stricter than the fire code. Was that not in relation to this project? And I thought that the answer was that we could not. I'm sorry, I didn't ask why you were at the...
That's all right. No, we did discuss some of those things. So you can't, when there's a fire code in place, you can't make it easier through an ordinance. But you can certainly go above, you know, to try to make things, to tighten it up and making it stricter. Like, you know, a perfect example, we've been talking a lot about inspection cycles. So the state says you have, you know, if they say you have to inspect this every 5 years, you can make an ordinance to say, no, we'd rather do it every year because we feel it's safer to be in a space every year versus every 5 years. So you just can't go backwards. You can't make it an easier, you know, less stringent code.
But could we, for instance, just enact a form of this resolution on our own for Princeton that we're discouraging this, right? You're saying, but that we cannot.
Can you,
Or can
Trishka?
No, and especially because there's some overlap here between some of these are really uniform
Right.
construction code requirements as opposed to fire code. And the uniform construction code is really, no pun intended, both a floor and a ceiling. So there's very little discretion there. I think the fire code carves out certain areas where it says explicitly the municipalities can
Right.
add on to the regulations, but even that's fairly limited. But we can certainly look at what can be done locally and take advantage of whatever we can do locally, but it will be limited.
Okay, thank you.
My suggestion to the group was that we look specifically at the fire code, what they say about inspecting construction sites, and then see if we can, you know, add anything to that, if possible.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now I want to go back to one of our announcements, and then we'll return to reports. So, very happy. I see Tanisha Nash-Laird is here, so I'd like to invite her up. And Tanisha is the new director of the Arts Council of Princeton, so welcome. I know there was supposed to be a meet and greet that got canceled or moved because of the snow, so I wanted to make sure everybody on council had a chance at least to connect the name to the face. And we're really excited for you to take the helm of one of our important community partners, and look forward to working with you. And if you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to say a few words, you're welcome to do that.
I just want to thank you, Mayor, and this body for inviting me to be introduced today. I am new to the position. I've completed 6 weeks now at the Arts Council, but I am not new to the area. I've lived in the area since '98, and I have 2 little ones back there who are consumers, if you will, of the Arts Council. So I'm just really excited to be a part of such a great institution in town. And I also want to point out that I've met with your administrator a couple times. So I'm getting started, and I'm excited about being here. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Jenny, did you want to give the report on the freebie from here, or from the report chair?
No, definitely don't. It doesn't rise to that level of that sitting in the chair. Oh my God. It's actually a quick report. I just thought you haven't heard much about the freebie. It's not an extensive report about costs or anything. It's just that you can see by the chart that ridership we have we divide the freebie service up into 2 parts. There's the commuter service, and that's the morning and the evening service, and then we call it the neighborhood service, which is the daytime, and they have different routes. So the commuter service, which is the original service that's how we got the freebie in the first place, because New Jersey Transit subsidized it since it was bringing passengers to the train station. Deanna, correct me if I say anything wrong. And so the ridership has diminished a little. So it's started out in 2014. It was about 47 passenger trips a day, and now it's gone down to 35. So it's not a lot. The Princeton station is obviously the highest station, where most of the people are going. So you can just look at the stops if you have any questions about that.
I have a question. Just since the commuter freebie seems to be declining in use, but the daytime freebie seems to have a lot of interest. Has there been any discussion about
Yes.
eliminating the commuter freebie and changing that to the daytime route starting early in the morning?
Well, okay, so yeah, I should have finished so if you turn the page over, or if you look online, if anybody else has it, I guess you guys don't have it sitting in the audience. The neighborhood service is doing a lot better. That's about 80 trips a day. And one of maybe about a year ago, or I'm not sure when we added the shopping center to the trip, but that was a really good addition to the trip. And we think that some people are using it to get to work at the shopping center. So we feel like that's a really good service. And so we have been talking about tweaking the schedule to turn the last of the morning schedule into the daytime schedule. And we're also thinking about ways that, to perhaps work with the merchants and have some kind of, encourage some of their workers, if we can find some kind of a parking spot, for them to be able to use the freebie to park somewhere more convenient than the downtown meters and drive in. That's something that one of the members of the Princeton, the Committee on Public Transit is working on.
Mr. Miller?
This is kind of off the topic that you're talking about, but does the decline in ridership to the station indicate a corresponding decline in the use of the Dinky?
It could very well. There has been a precipitous decline in use in the Dinky ridership. I mean, that's probably because of, there are probably two reasons for that. One is there's new parking at the Princeton Junction station, so we think that's taken away ridership. And then just the construction and the new location right now, it's not easy to get there still, by foot, right, still. So I think maybe more people are driving to the station, and we're hoping that Dinky ridership will increase again when the construction's over and all the confusion of that area is cleared up, and there's a new walkway. There's going to be a walkway from University Place to the station, which will be a more convenient way to get there for pedestrians.
Our MOU with the university calls for promotion of the usage of the Dinky. And I would think that you could interpret that to be promotion of the usage of the freebie to get to the Dinky. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't get a little bit more active about that.
Well, it's funny that you say that. I could have, because the Transit Advisory Committee also just appointed a subcommittee to work on that, because you're right, the MOU calls for a promotion plan, but it doesn't have a way to fund it. And so the committee is looking at maybe going to the Transportation Trust Fund for some help with that promotion plan, because the MOU I think it calls for the university and the town and New Jersey Transit to work together on a promotion plan. So that it just has never gotten off the ground because
one of the problems is that New Jersey Transit wasn't a signatory to the agreement.
That's right.
So New Jersey Transit hasn't been particularly willing to subsidize ridership any more than it already has by engaging in any kind of promotions. When you say that ridership is down, we're only 1 month into 2017, so that decline, right, represents just 1 month. So it could be a bit of an aberration. What it has been is steady. I guess it declined in 2016, but on the commuter freebie.
Oh, I see what you're
And
saying.
likewise, you know, the bump in the other regular freebie is also just a
That's-
month in
yes.
17. So
That's right.
it's hard to
That's
draw a
right.
conclusion about this year. I think it would be premature.
I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that it's not very high, but it is providing transportation for people who don't have it. If you look at this, if you look at the stops, you know, at Reading Circle, Elm Court, Princeton Community Village, and Spruce Circle are all, you know, subsidized housing that.
Yeah, it's serving an underserved
Yeah, so I think
population
it's a
that
good-
really
and
needs
we-
it. But, you know, at some point, we would have to ask whether this is the most efficient way to do that, particularly for this, you know, if we could run a smaller vehicle or let everybody take an Uber.
Now that it's legal.
I
Yeah.
think that's coming further in reports. I also wanted to mention, just so council knows, that one of the projects being funded out of the Transit Trust Fund is a Go Princeton campaign, which is helping to advertise the availability of transit options and also how they connect to one another. And so part of that is going to be letting folks know how you can take the freebie to the Tiger Transit to get you all different sorts of places that could potentially be useful for people. And
Right.
I think that's one of the big transportation resources in town, that everybody could still do a better job at advertising that Tiger Transit's available to everybody for free.
That's right.
And it does run some routes that are useful to folks. You know, for example, it runs out to the hospital, and it's a free service.
Right, and another improvement in the freebie service that the staff is working on is installing a transponder. We'll probably, the contract's probably coming to us very soon in the next couple meetings. A transponder that's installed so that the software that Tiger Transit, that you can install on your smartphone to see where the buses are for Tiger Transit, will also include the freebie. So if you're a freebie rider and you're a smartphone user, you can look and see where it is. And I don't know if you, like, I have my kids in the city use that all the time in Boston, and it's active in Boston. There's something like that in Boston right now. New York.
That's great. All right, are there any other questions from Ms. Krummeller? All right, thank you for bringing the stats to us. And then is there a schedule for the code review committee?
Well, I don't think we formally got one. We talked to Lisa about coming up with one. I emailed her today. She didn't get back to me. I thought,
Yeah, sorry about that. That was a little bit of a mix-up.
No, that's okay. So we'll
It's
put
not
it
really
on
ready.
for
I-
next
I-
agenda.
I can tell you generally that we're in the pipeline. We're working on miscellaneous offenses, and I think Lisa's working with Chief Sutter and the prosecutor on that. We have sidewalks. She's working with Deanna on that. You know, that would include the snow removal ordinances. Traffic, we think, should be a relatively simple one. We've got littering, and we have high school parking also in the pipeline to harmonize those ordinances. And Deanna, help me out here. I'm trying to make eye contact with you. Those should move along. The ones in which you're involved are kind of, we're getting close on those, right? The high school parking and the sidewalks, we're relatively close.
Yep, I was
Yeah,
just
so-
reviewing the draft of the high school parking as we sit here, so.
Multitasking, yeah. So we've met several times. We've got more meetings scheduled and plugging away. You know, it's on the goals, and I think we're acutely aware that this is the 5th year of consolidation, and although I think you can go longer in the ordinances, we'd like to have that discipline to finish up. But we probably do need to have a discussion about how we are going to manage the land use ordinances and see if we can't move that process along. I think the ordinance committee has some thoughts about how that might be done less expensively than having the planning board attorney do it.
Okay. And I want to see if there are any other reports, starting with Ms. Howard.
Yes, just one. We know that immigration issues have been in the news a lot. Over this weekend, there was a lot of news about stepped-up ICE enforcement across. Okay, it's on, but there was a lot of news over the weekend about ICE stepping up immigration enforcement across the country. And of course, that comes on top of the legal action regarding the president's refugee and immigrant bans. So it's been much in the news, and I wanted to report that the Human Services Commission is monitoring the situation closely. Our Human Services Director is the part of several national coalitions that share information on what's happening across the country and best practices for helping vulnerable residents. In one particular activity I want to report, last Wednesday, we've also been having meetings with stakeholders, and those meetings are pretty robust. We've got school officials, members of the clergy, Latin American Legal Defense Fund, Princeton University and the seminary, the library, merchants. We've been meeting to discuss how we can help local residents, and that led to last week's community meeting that we had at the library. We had over 50 people, and we renewed our Know Your Rights training, explaining to residents what their rights are with regard to law enforcement. Officer Narvez was there, and he and I spoke and reaffirmed for the public the fact that our local law enforcement does not enforce federal immigration law. So I want to thank my colleagues for signing on to that strong statement that I was able to read part of, and I want to thank Mayor Limpert and Councilman Quinn for coming to the meeting. So we had a very good meeting last week. Then you should also know that Elisa Nera and staff and volunteers are working with local families on what we're calling safety planning, which is to help families prepare for potential ICE action and what that might mean, especially if there are members of the family who might not be subject to that ICE action, who might be citizens and so would be here even if family members are detained or deported. And finally, I'll close in saying that one thing that's become clear as we talk to communities across the country is that even in communities like Princeton, where we do not enforce federal immigration laws, and of course, reminder to everyone, that's consistent with the New Jersey Attorney General's directive. But even in places like Princeton, where we're not enforcing immigration laws, that doesn't mean that ICE can't come into our communities. And we're seeing this stepped up enforcement across the country. One thing that we've been hearing from other communities is that when ICE comes in on these raids, they are not coordinating with local law enforcement, which is of great concern, I think, as a matter of safety. And also it will undermine trust between law enforcement and the community, even when it's federal actors coming in and it's not local law enforcement. It unfortunately blurs the line. And I talked to Chief about it briefly tonight, but some of you will recall a couple of years ago when ICE conducted an action in town and did not notify our police. And as a result, residents of the house were calling the police, thinking that one of their roommates was being kidnapped by these people who came in who weren't wearing uniforms, and it really did cause great concern. So this is just what we're seeing happen across the country, and there have been reports of this activity in New Jersey. So I don't know that it's fair to say that we're on top of it, because it's so troubling, and it's a many tentacled thing, but I can at least report that we are trying to engage as many members of the community as we can, and also, of course, to continue to send the message that we've been sending for years about being a welcoming community. So I'll continue to keep people posted, but obviously this weekend it really came to a head with the domestic action.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I'd like to report on the work of the Council Finance Committee, which has continued to work with the administrator, the CFO, and our staff on the 2017 budget. The Council Finance Committee met with the administrator, the CFO, and staff on the 25th of January, the 31st of January, and the 8th of February. And the review to date has been very beneficial in identifying additional revenue and savings, primarily as a result of more up-to-date and complete data available to the CFO after the books were closed for 2016. In addition, the review identified areas of smaller savings that could be realized in 2017, as well as areas that should be examined by the committee as part of preparation for the 2018 budget. The meeting on the 25th of January focused on services such as alarm and inspection fees, where the cost of the service is not fully covered by the fees charged by the municipality. Other services such as crosstown door-to-door senior and disabled transport were discussed, along with compostables. Recycling was discussed from the standpoint of the effective use of municipal subsidies for these services. On the 31st of January, the committee met with the Police Department Chief Sutter, with Bob Huff, the Public Works Department head. The discussion with Chief Sutter focused on the cost effectiveness and staffing needs of our police operations and the potential impacts of retirements in 2017 on departmental staffing. The review of the Public Works operation considered the provision of municipal garage parking privileges for employees of certain municipally affiliated institutions, enforcement of the leaf and brush ordinance, and the costs of collection of compostable materials. Staffing needs in the PW department, Public Works Department, were also reviewed in light of possible retirements in 2017. The operations of the Recreation Department and the Engineering Department were reviewed on the 8th of February. Ben Stentz, Director of the Recreation Department, pointed out that the personnel budget for his department for 2017 was less than that for 2016, and that the budget for parks maintenance was similarly reduced. Mr. Stentz pointed out that his department relies heavily on part-time seasonal employees, but this has been inefficient, as the part-time seasonal employees are hard to find and require more supervision than full-time employees. He also mentioned that the smaller in-town parks have maintenance and landscaping issues. The Recreation Department is also reviewing fees charged to various organizations for the use of municipal recreation facilities. The Engineering Department provides technical support to many other departments, such as infrastructure and public works, planning for the preparation of requests for proposals, review of bids, management of capital projects, and inspection of work in process. Because of the workload, the department has started to use local engineering firms to supplement our in-house inspection capabilities. The administrator has pointed out that his schedule calls for the introduction of the 2017 budget not later than the last council meeting of this month, which is the 27th of February, and the need for council to complete its work in time to permit budget introduction at that meeting. The administrator and the CFO will meet with council and the mayor in a work session on the 22nd of February. At that time, it's anticipated that the administrator will present a more comprehensive view of the savings achieved by the review of the budget, and the Finance Committee working with the administrator and department heads. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Mr. Miller? Could we get a copy of that?
There you go.
Thank you.
I'm glad you asked.
I was listening closely, but sometimes it helps to read, too. Mr. Miller, any reports?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick report from the IT committee meeting this morning, just about the room renovations. So you can see we have new microphones. The displays are not operational, but they should be soon. The whole thing should be done mid-March or the end of March. So, and I think we might be asked to have one of our meetings at Monument Hall. They're having a hard time because they need a 2-week window where, and Bob was saying it would help if we moved to Monument Hall, but I wasn't sure if you've talked to him about that.
Yes. Let's sit back a little bit. Actually, the meeting on the 22nd, if we can move that to Monument Hall, that will allow them to do some extra work during that period of time when we do our work session, and it's going to be a morning meeting. It may be fitting for Monument Hall, so I would ask council if they would be willing to move that meeting to Monument Hall that day.
Well, this morning, I thought Bob McQueen said that the vendor already has scheduled it, and it wouldn't help if we moved that to the.
I'll have to check them.
Yeah, because I offered to. I thought that was a perfect meeting to move. So, but he said, "Oh no, it wouldn't help because they've already made their schedule." So
I'll check with them.
But obviously, I think we would all be happy going over there. I was pretty sure the rest of the council wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I would actually say because the nature of that meeting, it would be useful to either have it at Monument Hall or in the community room.
Right.
Because it's more of a working meeting where we can sit around a table. And I would.
Oh, and then
I was just gonna just as a if Kathy, if you can just make sure you send out a reminder to everybody on Tuesday before that meeting on where we're meeting.
And then text everyone 5 minutes.
So everyone doesn't show up here.
One more thing to what I said before, and that is that at 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in this room, there will be an opening of the bids for the solar project for the Spring Street Garage.
Ah.
And if anybody is interested, you can come in and see if we receive proposals, and that will be a first indication of whether or not we have a viable project.
And then one more thing from the IT is that we are getting a new notification system. The staff has been working on this, but it sounds like it's going to be a big improvement where residents can sign up for notifications. It's not this Nixle. The police Nixle will keep this, the same. There won't be any change to that. But this will be notifications for, and people will be able to sign up for different things, and they will also be able to choose text, getting a phone call, or an email, and probably to their landline or their cell phone. So. And we'll have the resident's address. The one glitch is that we're going to have to start from scratch. Apparently we can't import phones and addresses, so we're going to have to do a push to get people to sign up. So I'm just putting that out there. When it happens, we might want to do a mailing or put it in the... When do the tax bills go out? I guess they go out... it's probably too late for that. So, I mean, it's probably... I hope that this is going to be implemented before that.
Oh, thanks.
Just real quick on the bike committee met on January 26th, and they're doing actually some really good analysis of crash data, accidents involving vehicles and bikes, and that would lead to possibly some safer routes and some advice for cyclists as to intersections that they might want to avoid. And they're working with Code for Princeton to analyze this data. And they're also looking at bike parking requirements with Deanna. And I want to get this on people's calendars early. Sunday, May 21st, the underappreciated Princeton Cyclovia returns to Quaker Road, and this is a day when from 1 to 4 Quaker Road is closed to motor vehicle traffic, and anyone who wants to go out there and walk or do any kind of wheeled vehicle is welcome to join in the community. And they're trying to hook in 2 rides. There's a ride called Chasing George that's leaving from Trenton and will ride on the DNR towpath and hook up with Cyclovia. And for those who are a little more ambitious, there's going to be a 35-mile ride that will leave from Princeton, go to Washington Crossing, then hook up with the Chasing George ride and end up at the Cyclovia. So Sunday, May 21st, mark your calendars. If you've never been, it's a wonderful event, and it's underappreciated, and so we'd like to see some more participation. Thank you. I'd also like to just point out I'm making the rounds and introducing myself to my committees. Met with PEC and the main thing that came out of that was a desire by PEC to at least begin a discussion of the possibility of adding a sustainability element to the master plan, and we're in discussion with the planning office about what the time frame would be and what that would look like, and they're also keen to look at some funding for consultants to help us with that effort. So that's all for now.
Okay, thank you. I have several reports. So as I mentioned before, I was down in Trenton last week at the Mayor's Legislative Day, and we heard from the DCA Commissioner, who announced that they're moving to a simplified online submission of budgets, and they're hoping to have that rolled out in 2018. They're working with several municipalities in a pilot this year, and that's supposed to make it easier. Right now, the finance officers have to do the budget in several different forms when they turn it in, and this will automate all of that. After they finish the online budget system, they're going to move on to online submissions to the local finance board, which also is supposed to help municipalities. So instead of having to make multiple copies, it's supposed to make that process easier. So those are all good signs. The assistant commissioner for the DOT spoke, and this is something I wanted to talk to council about. So everybody remembers there was a ballot initiative to increase the gas tax, which passed. That money funded the Transportation Trust Fund. However, in the enabling legislation, the legislature put in place a 4-person panel that is going to determine who gets the transportation money. Normally, this would be something that the Department of Transportation would do, but now there's going to be a step after the Department of Transportation looks at things. It's going to go to this 4-person panel. 4-person panel is made up of a person who is appointed by the Assembly Speaker, by the Senate President, by one person by the governor, and then a 4th person from the Department of Transportation. And nobody seems to like this system at all, except for maybe the Assembly Speaker and the Senate President and the governor. So every time I go down to Trenton, everyone's asking for help. So I would recommend that council passes a resolution. I can put it on the agenda that we ask our representatives to advocate against, to remove this provision for this 4-person panel. And I'm really concerned about the impact it's going to have for transportation projects, especially in central Jersey, because if you think about the makeup of that body, you're going to have somebody who's advocating for the north. Already, the Senate President has been advocating for light rail for Camden, without seeing any of the other projects that might need attention. And it's something where we have a lot of needs on our list. Not that ours should take #1 priority over everybody else, but it should be a fair process. So if everybody on council agrees, I can put something together for our next meeting. Is there? It seems
I
like
definitely
people are
agree. You know, and I was also thinking about the resolution, and same, also with the other resolution that that you're going to send, that maybe we should all make phone calls too, because I bet you that would help a lot.
Yep, I agree.
Is there any way we could, what was the argument in support of this? I mean, presumably there was something other than political patronage that made them have the 4-person panel. I mean, I wonder if that seems to be one side of it, and it's easy to say, oh sure, that sounds terrible, but what do they say in defense of it, I guess? Is there something you can read somewhere that before we?
if you can find an argument against it, everyone has been saying this was snuck in, and it's, I appreciate your innocent optimism about there being positive reason to stick it in there, but I'm open if there's a reason, but I can tell you the makeup of the panel now is, I'm concerned that it's going to have a detrimental impact on Princeton.
In your meeting, was there any reference made to the fact that as of a couple of months ago at the Delaware Valley Planning Commission meeting in Hillsborough, it was mentioned that although the increased gas tax had been passed, the enabling legislation to move the money collected under the increase into the Transportation Trust Fund had not been passed. And net result was that the money that was going into the Transportation Trust Fund was at the old gas tax level, and there was some uncertainty about where the other money was going.
I believe that this was the enabling legislation that established this four-person panel. I should also mention the four-person panel hasn't been appointed yet, so it does seem the opportune time to ask for its removal. All right, and then Ms. Krummeller and I attended a meeting with some of the advocates for earned sick pay, and they were interested in finding out council's plans for this year, and we reminded them that there had been this working group that was going to be looking at the two different proposals or the two different plans that were currently in New Jersey. And then we realized that we lost one of the members of that working group when Patrick Simon stepped off the council. So I guess I have two questions. The first is council still interested in reviving that group and having them look at New Brunswick and the other municipalities? And if so, it would be helpful to get a third volunteer.
Well, why aren't we discussing it as part of the
we can hold
overall
off too.
goals? And
that's fine.
Because as I recall, it wasn't one of the ones that bubbled up. Can we just see where we are in terms of everything that's on our plate?
That's fine, especially since we're about to talk about it. And then I just have one last report then. Which is I just attended the HPC meeting right before this meeting, and Steve Hiltner was there with some other members of the Herrontown Woods, Friends of Herrontown Woods, thank you. And they are interested in obtaining the Veblen House from Mercer County and restoring it, and instead of having the HPC contact the county directly, I asked them to send whatever message they wanted to send to the county, to the council, so that we're all speaking with one voice. So I just wanted to give council the heads up that we're likely to receive some sort of memo from the HPC on the Veblen House, and then I think we probably want to have a discussion with the county about if there's a way to help to facilitate a transfer or not. And that is it for my reports. Are there any staff reports? Ms. Stockton?
A few meetings that are happening this week. Tomorrow we will be meeting with the state and county regarding the consolidation requirement to renumber and reorganize our tax maps and tax lot and block numbers. So we'll keep you updated on what happens in that meeting. On February 15th, we have a neighborhood meeting for the Cherry Valley Road project. The first phase of the project will be tree removal work. If bids come in within budget, the work would take place in March, followed up by road construction in July, again, if bids come in within budget. We're also expecting bid openings this week for the cleanup of the Valley Road former DPW site, for the crosstown services, as well as the Cherry Valley Road tree removal project. And then lastly, the mayor, police, and I will be attending a pre-construction meeting at NJDOT for the 206 bridge replacement project. And that meeting will take place on the 16th. We'll be able to report back more on what the schedule is and who the contractor is and what's expected of him.
Can I ask a couple quick questions? At that bridge meeting, will HPC, did you mention HPC? Are they going to be part of that meeting, or?
HPC will not be part of that meeting. DOT will have a separate meeting with HPC, and I'm assuming with State Historic as well, to review the historic pieces of that project.
And on the tax map issue, are we advocating that we not change lot and block? That would be a very expensive project. Like, who's going to make that argument on our behalf?
That's exactly what the argument that we're going to be making. Currently, we have identifiers for each, unique identifiers for each block and lot. Our argument is why, with the consolidation and the cost, why make us change the block and lots and the resources it would take to do that?
Can you update us on Mary Moss Park? We're going to.
Yes, we have received the 90% plans on Mary Moss Playground, and those are in review right now. There's also been additional discussion on whether we want to use a single pass-through system for the spray ground or incorporate the filtration and chlorination piece of that.
And then I just wanted to add on to the 206 bridge, the HPC part. I mentioned at a previous report how the HPC would like to have a masonry expert consultant to be there to help, and they were going to come to council for funding for that, and before that comes to council, I have some feelers out, one to the county and one back to the state, to see if they would fund that expert instead. But if not, that request is going to come to council. Okay. Are there any other staff reports? Nope. Okay. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DeShield with the goals and priorities.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to begin by just going over a little bit of history for the goals and priorities for 2017. We started a new process this year. And as part of that process, it began in October of this year with the breakfast meetings with all the chairs to really get a good idea of what are all the priorities for the upcoming year. As a result of that process, over 67 different priorities and initiatives were identified. Those were presented to council, and then we went through a process of ranking those. The process began with council taking an electronic survey of the roughly 65 different priorities, and then a council work session in which we ranked those priorities. And what we're doing this evening is coming back to council with the results of those rankings and the next steps moving forward. In addition, there are a few areas where we need additional clarification that we'll be talking to council about. And unfortunately, your monitors don't work, so you may have to stretch your... This is also, these same charts are here that are in your reports if you look at your reports, but you can also look at the screen. So what we did was, as part of the process, we identified 3 tiers of projects for 2017 from the ranking. Tier 1 initiatives or projects, and those are projects that we believe to be the primary focus for the next year, based on, and where we determined those were the top ranking projects or priorities that were identified through the polling and the ranking. The Tier 2 projects were identified as those are projects that are an important focus for the year, not as important as those that are primary focus, and based on the fact that we have a lot of priorities, as I indicated before, over 67, that we'd be willing to put additional resources if necessary to commit to those resources to make those the possibilities. So the first thing I want to do is just to walk through those priorities that were determined to be in our Tier 1 priorities. One of the things that you'll see, there are a few departments, but one in particular that's going to be very strained during this process, and that's our planning department. We have a number of planning initiatives, quite a few throughout this year, and that's going to be a challenge, and you'll see a little bit later, that's where we're going to have to commit, definitely an area where there'll be a need for committing additional resources for. So as we walk through, we first had the Fair Share Housing Plan. We've been going through that process for affordable housing. Department responsible for that will be the planning department. The master plan re-exam, again, the planning department. Code consolidation. And a lot of these projects we've already begun the process. The harmonization of the parking meters in particular, the days and hours, improve the affordable housing application process, and address the maintenance needs for the existing affordable housing process. That's one of the projects that we'll have to, I'm going to suggest we'll have to move on to later in the year, just so we have the transition in the affordable housing office. The next step is the beginning of the planning for the Community Park South, continue our economic development strategies, approve the cold storage facilities, identify public works facilities and make improvements in those facilities, monitor the 206 bridge reconstruction, and improve the website appearance and develop a climate action plan. In addition, I'm going to just walk through some of the other ones to determine ways, and this is one, determine ways to promote green infrastructure. This is one where we're going to have to define what we're talking about in terms of promoting green infrastructure. I noticed some activities within the green team are looking at that, but we would need additional input on that. The next is to complete the bicycle master plan, stormwater management, welcoming American program, updating the emergency management plan, overnight parking, health, incorporating the health considerations into policy making. And again, that's one where we're going to have to talk a little bit more about the details of that. The parking study, the neighborhood character study, the Rutgers review models, and I know that's on its way, so we should be getting a report from the Public Safety Committee on that issue. Planning for the historic component of Mary Moss Park, the Mary Moss Park project, earned sick leave ordinance, and the Butler track. And the Tier 1 projects where those were important, and also any existing projects that we had. Next we have what was determined to be our Tier 2, which are to hire the masonry expert for the Route 206 bridge, develop a plan for GIS, emergency shelter plan, traffic calming, the second phase of the fire space and equipment study, the 5-year forecast, enhancing that process, developing a strategy for the municipal-owned properties, and developing a town-wide document archiving process, evaluating garbage and organic program, and creating guidelines for adaptive new use. And that's one where we're going to, I know we talked a little bit about, but we're going to have to get some more details. So that's just a run through of where were the top projects that came through, and where the departments that we see are the departments that would be responsible, and any committees. Before I move on to the next section, I want to know if there were any discussions or any areas here that I've identified that we want to move from Tier 1 to Tier 2 or Tier 2 to Tier 1. If not, I'll move on to really to the next, and nuts and bolts is really the questions.
Right. So the Tier 2 initiatives are ones that we might not get to?
No, they're just, it's just a matter of degrees. Our primary focus will be Tier 1. Tier 2, those are ones that we will get to, and if we need to push additional resources to get to, we'll get to those. But it's just a matter of degrees. 1 is going to be the primary focus. 2 will be kind of the secondary approaches. Those in Tier 3, those are ones that are there. If we get a chance to get to them, we will get to them as time is allowed and resources are available.
So tier one might be ones that we get to at the beginning of the year, and then I'm just trying to figure out the difference. Should I care if there's something on tier two that I think needs to get done this year? And move
All
it to
tier 1 and tier 2 are projects that will get done this year.
Okay. So it's more how many resources are going to be
That's
devoted
right.
to them. All right.
Tier 3 are the ones that may not get done this year, depending on time.
So the climate action plan, who's working on, I mean, I know that people on Sustainable Princeton are working on it, and
I can answer
Okay.
that. So there is a really terrific grant opportunity that, sometimes you look at a grant and you try to figure out how we can shape ourselves into the grant. This grant almost seems tailor-made for us, and it's a significant amount of money, and the match is from partners, so it's not even a municipal match. And so Sustainable Princeton is helping to put together the application for that, and it's a significant amount of money. It's six figures if we get the full amount, and so it would carry us through not just a plan, but hopefully some of the implementation for the first year.
I've met with a couple people about this, but I didn't realize that there was a grant. Since we had our goal-setting meeting, I guess maybe through the Finance Committee, Mark and I have done a little bit of research about the possibility of hiring a consultant that would possibly help us manage our fleet, our vehicles. But part of that could include, it looks as if you could have them manage your fleet based on any criteria you set forward, including the carbon footprint. So I know that's one of the things that they want to do, is measure what we're consuming now, and so we can get measurable goals going forward. We're at, we haven't even reached out to this consultant. I mean, it's in the very early stages of it. But if there's money available, we might have a match on our hands. So just
Right.
tuck that away as a
Right, so it's, I mean, we want to make sure we do a good job on this grant application, and it's due in July. And so the funding's not going to be here probably till, hopefully, if we're successful, till probably the fall, I would assume.
I don't know whether anybody else is surprised by this, but I look at the 20-odd items in Tier 1 and 13 items in Tier 2, and I see nothing that says anything about a plan or implementation of a plan to manage and preserve our tree canopy in light of the emerald ash borer infestation, particularly the tree canopy on municipal property.
that seems pretty important.
And again, this is based on the ranking. If you look back, if we go back, we'll see. Have to find it on the. You also have copies of the results, so you can go back and actually look where it ranked. And again, this is the process where we talk about whether things should be moved around those ranks. But just based on the voting that we did, it did not rank it as one of the top priorities.
I think it might have gotten dropped because it's the number one, or it's number two, but it's the same as number one. It's, if you look at the first set here, it received 83%.
Let me go back and check the results. Sure. You may be correct. No, you are correct. It got dropped.
Yeah, I think it just got dropped. That was a good catch.
I think we're looking at this in a slightly different form, right, than you have up there. We don't,
It may not be in the same order.
well, we don't have that form, do we? I mean, I
Not
see
the
a
exact
list
same
of things.
document.
I'm sorry?
It's not, you're right. It's not
Okay,
the
it's
same.
not that same.
Oh, no, I just have the list. I don't have the departments and the committees.
Right.
In the report, it just shows you the list.
I make a comment about this? I know this is our 5th year at the goals, and we've been sort of moving it along and trying some different things to see if we can come up with methodology that we really like. But I feel like we're back to a laundry list of things that need to get done, and I guess putting it in this form starts to identify who might have responsibility for it, but I think somehow council never really had the conversation. I guess, and the list is already formed, where I feel like we had our BCC meetings and we've had various conversations with people, but council didn't really sit around and talk about what it is, kind of overarching goals for the community and what we're willing to sort of take responsibility for or lead. And as I was thinking about the goals, and we heard from the Monsignor tonight talking about servant leadership, which we talk a lot about in schools, following up on our finance discussions, I also started talking to department chairs about what it is that would make them feel like they'd had a successful year. And I was able to talk to about 4 or 5 department chairs. Oh yeah, department heads, we call them department chairs in school. But, I think we've got really good professionals, and if we look around at the various departments and look at what we think that they can actually accomplish, we will end up with I think we could end up with a list that is more meaningful than this seems sort of scattershot. Like there aren't, it's hard for me to think about. So I called Bob Huff and I said, Bob Huff, what would make you feel like you'd had a good year if at the end of 2017 we got certain things done? And his list included the cold storage. It included the improvement to the facilities, which I don't know, did that make our list, the improvement to our DPW facilities?
Yes,
is that on here?
both of those.
Because it just felt EAB would fall under Bob Huff, and so would the sewer, the stormwater stuff that we've talked about. And to me, then you can also identify which council people are going to liaison and bring that to the council. Some of this stuff is just never going to come before council. And I think when we look at our work, what we should be thinking about is organizing ourselves so that we facilitate the work the departments are doing. If you look at, we've got that parking study coming out. We're expecting those results back at the end of August or maybe even early September. We're going to have parking on our agenda at almost every meeting, I think, between the time those come back and the end of the year, because we'll have probably a presentation on the results. We will probably have work sessions. We're going to have a possible ordinance to raise the meter fees. We're going to have ordinances that we're hoping this parking study will capture Maple Street and the parking in the historic Witherspoon Jackson Clay Street. We've also had requests on that, the daytime parking. We're going to have any number of ordinances related to that. Those take a lot of time and they're controversial. And I feel like in terms of our planning, that's what we need to be doing, is coordinating the things that we need to get done with our own calendar and what we can do to ensure that staff has the support they need to get these things finished.
I think that's well taken. I think maybe when this comes back to us in another form when we vote on it, and I think all of the things you mentioned are on this list. It's more just the formatting, maybe in the timeline.
And again, as we did last year, what we come back to with the resolution is a master sheet that gives you what's up here, which is the departments, the committees, and then a major milestone kind of timeline that gives you just a way to kind of plan out our year. So we will have that at the next meeting.
I second that, because I think one thing we have struggled with, this has been a tremendous process, but we've gotten better every year as we've done it, and I think where we've perhaps fallen down is how we've categorized what what is something that staff can do, what is something that council needs to do, what's something that is a joint and needs one product and the other, or vice versa. I mean, sort of, we need probably more nuance in that kind of thing, but I think it's all here, and we're just getting better at refining, I think, how we think about it. So I like what you have up there.
Do we anticipate, as this comes back to us, that we'll define success on something as completed all the way, or substantial progress made, or what
we will identify
key results?
What we'll do is we'll identify under each timeline what the expectation or the outcome that we will be looking for under that timeline for each one of the initiatives.
The other thing I just wanted to jump in, I spoke to Mark about, but would like council's feedback on too, is how to connect the loop back up, especially with our boards and commissions. So, we know there's a lot of energy and talent on our boards and commissions, and we might not have captured work for every single board and commission on this list, and it doesn't mean that we don't care about the work that they're doing, and we still want to keep up that conversation. And so to maybe have a second meeting with those groups that we had back in the fall, to have it in the spring, where we make that connection again, and to have the conversation about what the committees are working on, so we're tied in with that. And to also help, there might be projects. I thought there was a lot of energy around synergistic projects where different groups could be working with one another.
Well, Liz, don't you think we could, at the end of this process, also kind of have our own checklist and say, have we covered that? I mean, we can meet with the groups, but again, that's, that would take a couple of meetings to go through both of those groups. That would be 4 meetings, in the year. That's a lot, in addition to those groups having their regular meetings that we're also meeting with them all together. We could just look at the list and make sure that we've directed those groups as a management effort, like what is it we want them to do?
Right. I think just the issue is that they're volunteers, so I think it's nice to have the two-way conversation.
Yes. And there's still the tier 3 projects that we don't have on here. If there may be a commission or a board that's under that last year where they can work on that, it's not a major priorities, but it's something that we can, this would be something that council would be interested in. The next thing I wanted to go through are some areas where we need some additional clarification and some discussions about what are the impacts. The first one is to develop the plan for a town-wide document archiving system. And really the clarification we need is what I'd like to do is identify this project, kind of break it down into phases, and really concentrate on the primary phase of this for this year would be identifying those existing documents that are required to be archived for a long term, and determine a plan for archiving those digitally. Step 2 would be looking at how do we, in the future, start digitizing our documents moving forward. I think that's going to be a longer process because there's a number of rules in terms of state requirements that we have. But I think for this year, we can start figuring out how do we deal with those documents that we currently have. And phase 2 would be looking at how do we move forward into the future.
Well, but, I think we really have to look carefully at how we're keeping the records right now, because too many times we get documents that are scanned, and it's just so wasteful to file a document in a paper file and then scan it back in. And so I don't know if we need some kind of training or education or a system so that everyone learns how to organize documents on their computer and have a file system for retrieving them. Because even if the law requires you to keep a paper copy, we should be using, that shouldn't be the organizing structure for the documents. We should just have a copy that's the archive, that's the paper somewhere, but the document should be easily retrievable. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it seems really like if we start spending a lot of money to scan documents while we're still producing paper documents that we need to scan, that just doesn't make any sense.
I think one of the issues in terms of process, and it's not going to be a simple process as we may think, particularly on some of the documents that are provided in each one of the departments, in producing them in a way that you may think is that will allow us to do it digitally. That will take some time. What I try to do is identify something that I think we can accomplish this year in terms of developing a plan. I think that's a longer term plan, and I don't see us having a result this year on that plan, particularly in some of the departments. There may be some areas we can do it, but for overall, I think there's going to be a lot of areas where we're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring out how do we actually digitize documents.
Well, so just for one thing that I think I'd like to make sure that we're doing is, are we keeping up with digital signing? Because I believe it's been now made, it is now legal. The government has made it so that we can sign digits, we can use digital signatures. So that's no longer a reason, which is often given, that reason's given to me a lot of times. Oh, we had to scan it because it has a signature on it, but we don't need to do that anymore. So are we instituting a method of
We've actually
digital
already
signatures?
We've already started a process of doing digital forms with digital signatures. So we've started that process. So we've began that process already.
I also want to second what Ms. Krummeler said. I know that the neighborhood, what was that group called? About advisory planning district recommendations that came to us several years ago, or to have the planning board applications and zoning board applications available digitally. And it seems like we receive a lot of paper that then we're spending an incredible amount of money on to scan when all of that was created on a computer originally. And so I think we should put on our list that each department that has anything that they're scanning to put together a report this year about what the options are to start receiving that information digitally, because that's the part that where there's a disconnect that I still don't understand, why even if we have to require somebody submits written documents, that we can't also require them to submit it electronically, and we save the electronic copy.
Actually,
and we save ourselves hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's the one thing we can do if we'd like to put together a report so that, as I said, it's sometimes a lot more complicated by each department, just explain that to council where there are opportunities, where there are long-term, we can actually do that. If that's, if you'd like to kind of change that goal that way, I think that does make sense.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see a report on that by the end of this year so that, potentially we can start moving to that, at least in some departments.
And by the way, I think legal documents could be done that way too. I don't know if your firm is doing that more, because we get scanned legal documents also. So I'm just putting a plug in to say it's nice for any documents to be not scanned.
Yeah, I agree that not everyone is there, but I certainly prefer to have everything in electronic format.
It's really easy to just do save as PDF.
As I said, not everyone is there.
The next issue in terms of clarification is develop a coordinated townwide GIS program. And for this year, I see that process is really just completing a GIS implementation plan for townwide, what we can accomplish for the next year. That will require the cost of a consultant. We have funding already available in our capital plan from 2016 and requested money for 2017 to accomplish that task. The next issue is to begin the planning for the community park south improvements, and I want to define that task as being to complete the geotechnical evaluations and the preliminary planning for that project. And that would require additional resources to an engineering consultant, It's about $150,000, and that's just to do the geotechnical and some preliminary planning. The next area is the
Mark, can I just interrupt there? This isn't the only thing on there for Community Park South.
It is.
It is. We should also have on there sort of the community master plan. Didn't we feel like we could be able to get started on that, Deanna?
Yeah, I think that's what Mark did indicate, that it's both the geotechnical and the
Oh,
master
okay.
planning.
God,
Yep.
all right, sorry, I got
I
so
called it
busy
preliminary
trying to
planning, I'm
figure out
sorry.
where we were.
The next issue is to complete the neighborhood character study, and that's phase 2, actually putting together in preparation of land use ordinance and implementation. And again, that's going to be one where we're going to have to look at definitely additional resources. We're estimating between $75,000 and $100,000 for a planning consultant. As you saw in phase tier 1, there are a number of major planning projects that we have to do, and the only way we're going to accomplish all of these this year is to really get someone in to do to support the planning office. And we believe this is an area where we can have a consultant do that.
Can I ask something about that too? Is this a continuation? Is this the same consultant we've been using so far? Or are we going to? Is this something different? Haven't we already done some of this? Liz, Jenny? I'm
Yes,
looking
we
at-
have, and I think we were supposed to be getting
You're going to receive
some
a
clarification,
preliminary
because
report.
it seemed like some of the work that we thought that we paid for, it hasn't been done, so I don't.
What they were required to do is to give you some preliminary documents in terms of the quick fixes, and then give you a framework for a plan moving forward. But actually putting the ordinance together from that point forward is the next step, and that's actually putting the detailed land use ordinances. There's going to have to be community meetings and going before the board, so that it's going to require significant time to do that.
But they
I
still,
agree, but we need
yeah.
to look back at the agreement we had
Right.
with them before we do a second agreement to make sure that all of the provisions of the first agreement were
Yes,
met.
we're
instance,
actually looking at that, and I know Lee is on top of that. It's not necessarily the same. It may be, but it may not necessarily be the same firm.
Well, right, one of the big missing items for me is the neighborhood delineations and characterization study, where the consultants were going to divide up the town by neighborhood and then attribute some characters to them, to each neighborhood, certain characteristics.
I think it's worth going back and reviewing the
I'm not sure if that was,
agreement.
I will give you guys a report on it, but I'm not sure that was
It
part
wa-
of the details, but we'll check. The next issue is, and we spoke about this before, was hiring the masonry expert and contractor. The request for that is $20,000, but I do think we need some clarification on what the role would be for the masonry expert and how they will fit in to make sure that we get the bang for our buck for that process.
Okay, sorry to do this to you. So is the masonry expert different than this is the consultant that HPC wants to hire?
Yes,
That
this is
20?
the one where I'm trying to see if somebody else will pay for this.
Right, okay, we talked about that.
The next issue is to identify and make improvements for the public works and PSOC facilities. Initially, I don't want to be sticker shock. The initial request for the budget is $1.8 million. That's what was our initial estimate. We're going to we'll go back and we'll fine tune that. That was just their initial estimate. We'll go through the properties and see what is necessary to make the necessary improvements to those properties, and then provide council with those details. The next item we have is incorporating considerations for decision-making, health decision in the decision-making process. And again, part of that is going to be, it's a new kind of concept. It's really getting direction on what
Yeah,
we're
I
looking to do on that.
I would
piece
say
of
that
it.
needs to, I would expect that we would have something from the Board of Health by the end of the year, and there's no council action necessary.
The next item is to approve the design for the cold storage facilities. And one of the things we need to do is determine the most cost-effective design. We currently have two design areas, and one is 1.5 and one is 3.8. And really the key there is determine, based on the useful life for those properties, what's the most appropriate facility to build at that facility, and it's really to find out, they asked that question. Oh, I'm sorry to turn into.
One is really heavy duty and lasts a long time, and the other's lighter, doesn't last as long.
Yeah, it seems to me that we discussed that trade-off at an earlier council meeting and looked at the trade-off between the life of the two facilities, the cost of construction, and the type of construction to be used. And are you suggesting we need to go back through that once again and
I'm saying we just need directions in terms of staff
we
of
didn't decide.
which way we go.
are you looking for direction from council to say
Correct.
this way or that way?
Correct.
Right now?
No, not now.
Right.
That's part of the process. And then the final item where we need additional clarification is really creating the designs for the adaptive use and renovation of existing housing and promote age-friendly communities. And I know we had some initial discussion about this area, but this is an area where I really need some help from council in terms of what you're looking for in terms of an objective here to put this together. And I know, Bernie, we had started.
I remember what we talked about during the last goal-setting meeting was a checklist that would be voluntary, that we were going to see if we could put together a group or ask for the Senior Resource Center to help with putting it together. And it would be something that would be available upstairs for people who came in. So when they did construction, they would make the doorways so that they'd be wide enough for wheelchairs, and they could put other accommodations.
And
So
I think we thought likely there is already a list out there.
Right.
Probably, and we just need to identify it.
There are several, Jenny.
Those were the areas where I needed additional clarification. Based on this, and we jumped ahead a little bit, the next steps of the process are, one, to take the Tier 1, Tier 2, go back to both the departments and identify milestones and objectives for those, put timelines associated, responsible parties, present that to council at the next meeting unless there's any additional questions or comments.
I think it'd be useful to maybe have the list in several different formats. So if we could also have the list, a list of all of our boards and commissions.
By boards and commissions, okay.
Right, by boards and commissions, and which of these, for the Complete Streets Committee, for example, which of these we'd expect the Complete Streets Committee to review, and to see if there's boards and commissions without anything, and if there's others that have a long list, just make sure the chair knows that council's hoping that they're going to weigh in.
Well, right. I mean, I also have, for instance, on the Complete Streets Committee, there's a couple projects that aren't on this list that the Complete Streets Committee is doing. So they don't really require the council to do anything, but I don't know if they need to be on this list.
But that's where I also think looking at things by department is realistically, we've heard that planning is pretty busy, swamped, but we met with Deanna as part of finance. Did we meet with you as part of finance or parking or one of those things? Her list is also very long too. She's involved in engineering is involved in almost every single thing that we do.
I know.
And so I think that we need to look at it, and we might need to look at what council members have got on their plate as well. I mean,
so another recommendation then would be to have the list and then have it listed several different ways.
I can do that.
So one by boards and commissions. I think would also be useful to see it by department. And when you do the department ones, if there's a way to break it up with items that are going to need council attention, and then just other major projects that departments might be working on, for example, the health department accreditation and the police department accreditation, that might never come to council, but might be taking up a lot of time and maybe put those in some, like a italics or different font colors, so we know it's not something that's coming to us, but just so we have an awareness of other things that staff is working on. I think that would be helpful for us to see.
But that sort of thing would also probably come to us in the form of a report. So we might want a placeholder on the calendar as we start to think about reasonably what we can do at every one of these meetings. I mean, just looking at this list, you can almost plot it out yourself between the budget meetings and moving on the cold storage, if we're going to do that. You know, the year's almost over.
Well, happy Valentine's Day. And then I should also note that there are likely going to be several major projects that are going to take up a lot of our time that we don't even know about at this point.
So were you finished? I'm sorry. Before we concluded, I wanted to circle back to Earn Sick, which I would note is a Tier 1 initiative. It is something, as I recall, the way we left it last year, the committee that was comprised, so I'm the only one here actually, Lance and Patrick were on the committee with me, and we submitted a memo to our colleagues stating that we were not recommending action at the time because there were some pending ordinances that had been adopted in other municipalities that we wanted to study more, and we didn't have consensus among us, that subcommittee. And so I would like to keep it as obviously as a priority issue, and would like to continue to work on the issue, and I'm happy to continue serving on that subcommittee. And since Lance is not here, I think we should assign it to him as well, and to continue. He was a good colleague. But in all seriousness, I think we outlined in that memo some work for us to do this year, which is to basically go back and see where there's a difference in the municipal ordinances and how those are playing out and how effective they are, and basically how that's playing out in terms of the workers being served, the businesses being affected. So I would like to keep this as a front burner issue and reconvene that subcommittee to continue to investigate, and would welcome a third person to join Lance and me. I'm sure he would as well.
Heather, I thought also on the agenda was to look at the variety of part-time people. I thought that was an issue with, for lots of different reasons. The part-time people were
like, what is our
sticking point
workforce
about
look like? Yep.
Yeah.
We can. I mean, I don't want to promise much on that because we talked to Ralph Widener. There's a real lack of data, so it's anecdotal. We can talk to merchants, and we can definitely talk more about trying to assess what our workforce looks like. And that, you're right, that was on the agenda too. I mean, I'll have to pull up. I don't have the memo in front of me, but basically refresh the analysis in the memo and continue to work on it.
Well, seeing no one raising their hand to join this working group.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Oh, there's Mark. What happened to Mark?
Thank you, Mark. And you ended with a
Thank
whimper.
you.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Doesn't this hours of operation, which is in Tier 2, that sunsets this year, correct?
That's why I was asking the question. And
I recall that Councilwoman Crummiller had an idea on that. I thought that we discussed it at a previous meeting.
Right, and I spoke to Trishka about it, and I reached out myself. The ordinance we have now calls for us to put together a working group, and with members of the business community and members of the neighborhood and members of council. I took the liberty of reaching out to the neighbors who said they thought it was working fine, and I reached out to merchants who also said they thought it was fine, basically. And so...
Well, I was on that committee too. Right? Right. No, I was already. So we already did our committee work. We already did it.
Okay. So should we have a report about that then in writing?
Yes, if you just present something in writing to the
council.
council.
Well, we'll present
I
it at
do
the next
agree
meeting.
it has been quiet, so I think it's working, but I think we also need to...
But we need
The ordinance
to
does
re-up
require,
it, right?
the ordinance that does require that there be a report to the council. So
Okay, Ms. Crummell and I will
It
have
does
a
not
report at the next
specify
meeting.
how long or detailed it needs to be.
Okay. Okay. I lost my agenda here. Thank you. All right. So now we come to our ordinance public hearings. The first is 2017-1, an ordinance by Princeton concerning the Animal Control Advisory Committee and amending Section 2116 of the Code of the Township of Princeton, 1968. And this ordinance essentially gives us some flexibility to add additional members to the Animal Control Advisory Committee.
I'll move it.
Second, I mean, it adds some excellent additional expertise too. So I second that.
Okay, moved by Ms. Krummeler, seconded by Ms. Howard, and I would like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes. Next is 2017-2, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton abolishing the General Board for making assessments for local improvements and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And what this ordinance does is it abolishes the Local Improvement Board and moves that decision-making directly to the council. And is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Butler. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Next ordinance is 2017-3, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating no parking and 2-hour parking on the east side of Pine Street and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Mr. Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeler. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-4, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating no parking on the north side of Russell Road between Wynant Road and Hun Road and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler and seconded by Ms. Butler. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Miller? Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-5, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating no parking, 2-hour parking, and 10-hour parking on the north side of Mercer Street between Nassau Street, New Jersey Route 27, and Edge Hill Street, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeler. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Miller? Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next is ordinance 2017-6, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating no parking and 2-hour parking on Carnahan Place and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And what this ordinance does is it moves the parking from one side of the street to the other, I believe, right? Okay.
Where the sidewalk is.
Where the sidewalk is.
At the request of the neighbors.
At the request of the neighbors.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, before we vote, Heidi, your name was the only one that wasn't on the.
Well, we're going to open up the public hearing in a second.
Oh, okay.
So it's been moved by Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Howard. I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance.
I don't think that's why she's here, so I just wanted her to nod.
It just her eyebrows went up, so.
I just assumed that you were in favor of it, or we would have heard from you.
All right, now we've tortured Heidi enough.
No shrinking violet in the audience, yeah.
27.
Madam Clerk, I've opened up the public hearing and seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Yes. Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Krummeler?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ordinance passes unanimously. Next is 2017-7, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning garbage, refuse, and recycling, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller and seconded by Ms. Butler. I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard? Mr. Miller? Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we move on to resolutions. First resolution is 17-58. Resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Pruzesi, McDermott, Maestro, and Murphy for a sum not to exceed $15,000 to serve as labor counsel for 2017. I apologize for butchering people's names. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Ms. Butler. Any discussion? All
No,
in favor?
Just,
Oh,
I
sorry.
was just going to say that this would have normally been done at reorg, right? That this is just something we do annually. It's not anything.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 1759. Resolution authorizing the extension of the existing contract with Magic Touch Construction for plumbing services, various locations within the municipality of Princeton for 1 year, 2017, for an amount not to exceed $75,000.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any
And this
opposed?
is also another annual contract, correct, Bob?
Ms. Howard appreciated the name. All right. Resolution 17-60, resolution authorizing the extension of the existing contract with Tom L. Wells, electrical contractor, for electrical services, various locations within the municipality of Princeton for 1 year, 2017, for an amount not to exceed $150,000. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Any discussion? All in-
Just
sorry, Mr. Quinn.
in these contracts where the amount is not to exceed, how often do they reach the number, or are they typically lower than the set number? Just point of.
Typically, sometimes our legal ones.
So
Typically, the annual contracts are lower, and usually, unless there's some circumstance where we have a major project, for projects, these particular contracts, which are our electrical and our plumbing, usually fall within that area.
It's only the lawyers that go over.
You know how
That
unreliable we
was-
are.
All right, people are feeling feisty tonight. All right, Resolution 17-61, resolution supporting assignment of receivables to Mercer County Improvement Authority and outstanding claims in the amount of $19,376. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And next we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature, passed by a single vote. Are there any items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda? All right, and is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Butler. Oh. Do we have like an additional public comment? Yeah, come on up.
I may have missed it, but I thought you guys were going to be talking about the addition of the construction waste to the waste ordinance. Did that already pass?
Yes, I
got
think we
here
did.
too
You know what?
late
You
this
missed your
evening.
shot. I think it was in the garbage.
Right.
Ordinance.
I thought
Right.
those-
It was
all the
in-
ordinance things were at the end? No.
No.
I missed
It
that.
was.
That was the end, sort of. Sorry, it was right after the Carnahan
Yes.
Place where we were teasing you.
But you know, that's funny because I thought you were going to speak about that.
I was, and I was listening for it, and I didn't hear
It's
it come up.
2017-7.
It was the garbage one. I was looking at
Garbage
you too
refuse.
because I thought you were.
Do you?
Why don't you
can I
make
make
your
it-
comments
can I
for
make-
the record, and then
Okay.
we can take them under advisement if we want to go back in.
And I think, because we did talk about that, we talked about it in our ordinance meeting, and we're aware of the concerns that you have, but, so go ahead, I think you should.
Okay. Sorry, I had sitting there paying attention even. I don't know how I missed that. But anyway, what at first I wanted to just congratulate you guys on, finally incorporating this into the ordinances for Princeton. I think it's very important from an environmental standpoint that we begin to chip away at all the, especially organic material that ends up going into landfill, because it goes, they knock a house down and it all goes into a giant dumpster and it just goes to a landfill because none of it's been sorted. And that's, a very bad thing for the climate because all that organic material increases methane in the atmosphere. So I just wanted to thank everyone for, moving that ahead. I did want to make 3 comments. I know that the PEC had made some comments on the ordinance. And we got a response back, although it was a little bit later in the game, and I probably should have reached out to someone once I got the memo, but I didn't see the memo. All I saw was the attachment of the ordinance. So that was kind of my fault for missing that, I guess. But, and I understand there are some regulations that are governed by the UCC, but there were 3 important points in there, and I'd just like council to think about this. One is that, I have a lot of experience on construction sites, large and small, over the course of the last 30 years as an architect. And I've been out on a lot of job sites, and I know how they're run. And if you really put the rules in place, people follow them. But if you're not serious about it, it's just another one of those things that, is brushed aside because it's kind of getting in their way of getting the construction done. They're very focused on getting it done. So since we could not tie this to either permitting or a CO, I thought that at the very least for larger construction projects that probably would come before planning board for site plan approval, just as we have a green development checklist that gets submitted as part of their site plan approval process, and in fact their application is not complete if they have not submitted that green development checklist. We could also be having them submit their recycling plan as part of their application process, and their application would not be deemed complete unless they had submitted that. And that's a way of, making sure that the plan has actually been developed, that somebody had a chance to look at it, and they are really ready to go in terms of recycling. This is particularly important in bigger projects. The second thing is on bigger projects, typical of something like Avalon. And, considering that, we're not thinking about it right now, but I foresee Princeton, there's a lot of pressure for development. There will be many more larger developments that will, whether it's the university or what have you. And these are not just single-year developments or construction process. They're multiple-year processes. And so to wait all the way till the end to get a report to see how that recycling is going and not require at least a yearly report I think is a mistake. You want to see that they're actually meeting that 50% goal as they go along. And I've worked on many projects where, because we were really actually trying to achieve a very high goal of recycling, like 90%, we track that almost on a monthly or, every 2-month basis. And the contractors submitting recycling reports so that we can see that. I'm not suggesting that we have the GCs do it on a monthly basis, but it seemed to me that if you're building something over the course of 2 or 3 years, once a year is not too much. And then the last item is the education of the subcontractors. This is vitally important because the way it works, particularly on a larger construction site, is you have a general contractor or a construction manager, and they spend the vast majority, there are project managers who probably are the ones dealing with, they're spending the vast majority of their time either in the trailer or in the office, and they're not even on site. Then you have the job super who's running around trying to troubleshoot and make sure all the deliveries are being made and so forth. And you have a variety of subcontractors, electricians, plumbers, mechanical contractors, concrete contractors, demolition contractors, masons, steel workers, you name it. So the list can be pretty long, glazers, it's just on and on. And if each one of them is not aware of what that construction recycling process entails, and that they are required to separate their demolition and construction debris, and that there is a logistics plan, here's the dumpster where it's going to landfill, and here are maybe 2 or 3 other dumpsters where this stuff is getting separated. And if you haven't developed some kind of training material and sort of shown that you are talking to these subcontractors, even on a smaller project for a house, you'll have framers, electricians, plumbers, you have all these different tradespeople, and they're coming in at different times. The right hand is not talking to the left hand at all. And so these are the sort of 3 points that I want to make. And these were points that I made, or the PEC made in our comments. Obviously, there wasn't this sort of more elaborate explanation of why we made those comments. But I wanted to share that with you tonight. Now I know you've already voted and everything, but I'd really like council to consider amending this ordinance if at all possible, if it's not too much of a tall order. Because I think these points are important, and if we're serious about making this happen, then you have to understand the workings of a job site and understand the workings of contractors and construction in order to make it real. So thank you very much, and thanks again for incorporating this into our waste disposal ordinance.
Wait, Heidi, can I ask you something? Because someone, I don't remember who it was, told, I don't know if you told us on the code review, that that for construction companies or whoever is doing it, recycling is cost effective. So there's a market incentive for them to do it, so they all do it anyway. Is that?
Yeah, I would say probably you're right for some of the bigger projects. The tipping fees for landfill are very high. So, most of the bigger projects, that's probably true. But there's sort of an educational component that's going on here as well. The fact that we're codifying this and saying you must recycle 50%, and you must talk to hopefully your subcontractors and make sure they're aware of it. Because ideally, I'd like to see this bump up even higher, see this as a first step towards a more aggressive approach to recycling construction and demolition waste. But for the smaller contractors, like I said, I just saw another house go down. I don't know where it was, over by Grover or someplace over there, you know, behind the shopping center. Whole house right into the dumpster, you know.
Would this ordinance apply to that one?
Absolutely.
I mean, with the suggestion that you're making for the checklist, I know that happens at the planning board, so it doesn't happen on smaller projects. So are you?
Well, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to tie it somehow to, say, the inspection process, or, CO or permits or something, because it gives it, a little bit more teeth. It makes people really aware that they have to comply with this. Of course, at this point, it'll be more like the enforcement, it'll be more like, I drove by and I saw all this stuff going into a single dumpster, and I'm going to call the municipality and say, by the by, I think they're not recycling. Do they have a plan? What the heck's going on over there? And it'll be something like that. But I think the vast majority of Princeton citizens are not going to be that aware. So there's a little bit of an issue here with enforcement from my perspective.
Another recommendation I may make at this point is, I know the PEC is reviewing the green building checklist and seeing how it's used, and it might make sense to have this be part of the green building checklist, or to maybe have a variant of the green building checklist for single family homes. But if I would maybe ask the PEC to take a look at what exactly those provisions would be. Could we put them into the existing green building checklist, and as you go do that review, to incorporate
those
provisions?
The problem with the green development checklist is it is not a mandatory, the ordinance is very different. An ordinance says you must do this. This is the law of Princeton. You must recycle your construction waste.
Right.
So it's very, very different than the green development checklist. And again, we could put together, say, an educational piece that got handed out to anybody who was pulling a permit. Did you know you're supposed to do this, or something like that? But it doesn't, compel them like the ordinance does.
Okay. Well, thank you. And
I just want to reassure everyone, when Lisa works on these, she works with the relevant staff people. She worked with John Patinotti. And I can't speak to all the details about why it didn't end up in the ordinance, and I don't know whether, Trishka, you can do it, but you should rest assured that if we'd been able to do this, we would have, whether it's a function of enforcement or not being able to require things beyond what the state requires. I'm just not sure, but it's not as if we didn't look at them, and we looked at them with people who understand the issues.
I would say, going back to our goal setting, when we have the list of ordinances that code review is doing, I think it's really important for the work on that committee to make sure it goes through other processes too, because I think we're
It did, Liz.
It went through Environmental
it went to
Commission.
PEC. Okay. It went to Bob Huff. It went to we've looped in everyone, which is why we're approaching the end of 5 years and we're not through them all.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just, in response to that,
I'm sorry. It's like we passed the ordinance, and I feel like people are getting. It's like we've gone 20 minutes over on something we've already voted on. So, yeah. But thank you, and your points are well taken, and I think it's important for us to take a look at. Are there ways we can incorporate some of those suggestions? And I'd feel personally more settled if we can just make sure that, given that Heidi gave some more detail, maybe that wasn't in the original memo, that we can double check to make sure that you did. Okay. Okay. All right. Mr. Huff? But you have to come up to the mic. You can have the last word.
Oh, man, hey, we got hours.
But apparently we have something that can turn off your mic from here, I think, the new technology.
I'll override it. Yes, we did meet, and there were meetings. Lisa had meetings with us as staff. Jeff was at one or two of them. He's shaking his head no. You were there because I was there. And John was there, so yes, it went through. But I did write a couple things down, and there was a couple valid things. I will go back and look to see that we did.
Hopefully you heard that, Heidi. But there were some things we think we might be able to act on that we're going to look at. Okay? Thank you. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.